Welcome back. We're wrapping up our discussion as we analyze the provincial election results in Alberta. Again, the UCP, led by Premier Danielle Smith, has a majority, and Rachel Notley, the NDP, which is the official opposition, she's hanging on. She didn't resign. Actually, let's talk about that very briefly. Were you surprised, Mike, that Notley didn't announce a resignation? Doesn't sound like she has any intention to resign.
No, I wasn't surprised at all. I think it's close. She obviously can hold on to the leadership she wants. I think she's going to wait to see whether Danielle Smith is able to put it together. I think she's hedging her bets. I suspect that a year and a half will go by. If the Smith government's performing well, I think Notley's going to start sniffing around federally.
Okay.
That's my opinion. Now, interesting, I have a theory. It may be federal NDP, but I've heard stories that she may go federal Liberal and that Trudeau's going to bring her in. But the problem is, how do you get elected as a Liberal in Alberta would be another matter.
Yeah, that's something to chew on for certain. Speaking of, and you touched upon this briefly, Rob, in our previous segment, it seems that there's this habit that Conservatives tend to knife their leaders midway through term. And you mentioned a couple of now cabinet ministers were actively campaigning to ditch her. Is that a reality? Is that something that could actually happen?
Well, she creates some of her own problems this way because clearly she got into the leadership with the instructions on the mandate to clear out some of the Kenney cronies and mess, and she left them in. And the electorate said, we don't like them, so they got rid of them. So the electorate's actually taken care of a few of her problems for her. They've made it easier for her that way. They've given her a caucus that is now 2/3 rural, which is way easier to deal with than some of the roller coaster stuff in the city of Calgary, so fair enough. But yeah, she's got red Tories who just like the power and want to hold on to the positions and stuff. Stelmach made the mistake of giving those people too much rope, and they hung him with it. And she has to be careful that she doesn't make that same mistake that Stelmach did.
So how does she navigate these waters? What do her priorities look like post-election, Mike? Will she follow through? Will she sound more like she did in the leadership or more than the general election?
Well, as Rob says, she's going to have to walk a narrow line if she wants to keep that motley crew united. I think the big issue that's coming up, though, at some point, the gloves are going to come off with Ottawa. And particularly an issue that we haven't mentioned, the federal insane policy of saying that there will be zero targeting CO2 emission for the electricity grid by 2030. I mean, even Notley came out in the campaign and said that's ridiculous.
It's too aggressive.
I think that if she goes against Ottawa, she's particularly going to go on that issue because she'll have some support amongst the general electorate. So I see Smith putting her team together, but it's not going to be very long before the guns are going to be out vis-a-vis Ottawa. No question.
Do you concur, Rob? What do you think her priorities will be coming in the few upcoming months?
Well, fighting Ottawa is always good for an Alberta premier. So she's learned that lesson. Lougheed said his biggest mistake was shaking hands with Trudeau and clinking champagne glasses. So make sure not to do that. I would say this net zero is a big thing because, Notley had one date, Danielle had a later date. I think Alberta, this new government, has to come out hard against net zero. It just doesn't make any sense. And they have to say, take it and shove it. I would also like to see them fight the federal government because you have the Bank of Canada putting out feelers on digital currency. I think they need to say, no, none of that. So they need to fight some of these federal initiatives for sure.
Okay, we only have 45 seconds left. Thinking federal, just like we've introduced, Pierre Poilievre from Alberta. He is the leader of the Conservatives federally. Do the election results in Alberta help or hinder him? Or maybe they're indifferent. Mike?
Well, they don't hurt him very much. I'm not so much they help him. I mean, they've all got, but they have every seat now except about 3, I think. Maybe 3 or 4. No, I don't think it's particularly going to have that much effect either way. I mean, it was a narrow Conservative win. So there's a strong non-Conservative vote now in the province. But I don't think this has that much effect on the federal seats one way or the other. Rob may have a different view, but I don't see the election as having much effect on the federal scene.
Rob, literally 10 seconds.
Well, if the NDP had won, it would have been bad, I think.
Yes,
but with the UCP back in, I think it's clear sailing for Pierre.
Okay, both of you, thank you so much, and we'll have to have you both on again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya.